It is these fires in our lives that changes the course of our lives and actually turns into becoming the biggest gift within your life. And I ended up rebooting my life completely. Like, I was at such a bad place within my life. Financially, I was completely broken, and I sold and gave away everything I had down to a backpack with 52 items. And I became a nomad for over 6 years. I realized in looking back, compared to the way I live my life now, I hadn't understood life. I hadn't understood the importance of doing hard things. I didn't have this deep foundation to be able to endure the storms of life. We've lost so many things that our ancestors used to go through, and that was rites of passages where young boys would become and go through difficulty, hardship, having to survive in a forest for a week or two and do difficult things that gave them the foundation to be able to deal with more difficult things later on in life. When it came to this biggest storm that I ever faced in my life, I was just crushed by it.
I sit down with Garry Junkuhn in today's episode of Order Within, and him and I discuss a wide variety of topics. You got a little taste of it there. His work with helping fathers regain connection with their children is so important in today's world. The thing that's interesting about what he does is Garry started this journey based on his own experience of losing his kids for a 6-year period of his life and the challenges that he went through as a man to reconnect with who he was and shift the direction of his life. By reclaiming our masculinity, our strength, our passions, our health, we set a new tone, a pace for existence that often was missing before these big events in our life. Garry helps other fathers who are going through similar situations to reclaim their sense of zest and passion for life by living challenging, deep, rich lives. That means pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zones, working to get physically fit, challenging our minds, and doing hard things. We talk about a variety of things in this conversation: the culture of masculinity, what it means for young men in today's world, how fathers can lead by example, and many more things. So I really hope you dig this conversation, so let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to Order Within, navigating a world of endless chaos and crisis. Many of us are experiencing inner turmoil, insecurity, anxiety, fears, and isolation. These feelings are only being amplified by news cycles, social media, and never-ending political madness. How do we find our way out of the chaos? How do we find strength within ourselves? How do we find meaning in a world driven by materialism? These questions and many more I aim to answer on the show. My goal is to be a trusted guide on your journey to selfhood. May you find what you seek. Garry, what's up, brother?
Brandon, good to see you again.
You as well, man. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for the invite.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to chat. We connected a few months ago, and I've been looking forward to this conversation. I feel like we're going to get into the weeds. You do some interesting work, and I think it's very important work. Before we get into it, if you wouldn't mind, we just give a little brief background about yourself, who you are, what you're doing, and get into it.
Absolutely. So originally from South Africa, I'm a father with 2 epic sons. They're now 19 and 22. I've my entire focus for a number of years now is just working and guiding fathers. So it's a continuous journey of learning, and the experience with those fathers is just helping me to become a better father as well with my son. Very grateful.
That's excellent, man. Well, I know that when we spoke initially, and just what I know about your work, you started a business, and I love the 100,000 fathers, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into the conversation here. But, this whole journey for you was prompted by a pretty hard experience, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And sometimes it is these fires in our lives that just changes the course of our lives and actually turns into becoming the biggest gift within your life. And I know for me, it has become the biggest gift. And that gift was losing contact with my 2 incredible sons for over 3 years when they were 10 years old and 13. And that was something I could never ever imagined would ever have happened from the beautiful relationship that I had with them and the time that I was spending with them, but just life post-divorce, just a sequence of events that took place. And yeah, could never have imagined it. But now, over 6 years that I've been reunited with my sons, I think feel like it's strengthened our relationship. There's so much more appreciation because of this time apart. from both of us. And when we spend time with each other, we're just so present. And so it's just making the most of every moment that we have together. So
Mm.
it's was a brutal journey, but looking back now, compared to the fathers that I do work and guide with, it feels like I was running fast one day and I tripped and I grazed my knee and there was some blood. Compared to the fathers who haven't seen their kids for 10 years, 20 years.
Oh,
It's very
wow.
intense, this.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, that's the thing about your work, right? Is you went through this experience yourself, and you've been inspired to help other men in that way, help other fathers, which is so critical. I'm very appreciative of the work that you're doing, and I don't think people realize how common of a thing this is either in our world. And th- there's often very little that men can do when they're in these situations based on the way the court systems are structured and the now this is not an argument for or against men and women how how they're treated in the judicial system, but when it comes to custody things, it's pretty blanket. Like it's pretty difficult for women to often lose custody or lose those fights, and so men face an uphill battle. I'd imagine for you, you started there. So Gary, if you wouldn't mind, like if we could, I know I'm from divorce family, so I mean, I know divorce is messy, so we don't necessarily have to get
Mhm.
into the details of your divorce, and I mean, unless you want to share anything that you feel is relevant. But would you mind to take us back a little bit, where before this happened, kind of what led up to it, and then how did you start to find clarity about what the hell you're going to do next, man?
Yeah, absolutely. Divorce with my ex it was actually amicable. We just got to a place in our lives where we just weren't going in the same direction.
Mm.
And
Gary, real
it
quick,
was
how long
about
were y'all
three
married before you
years,
got divorced? Sorry, just curious.
10 years,
10 years.
10
Got it.
years,
Okay, got it.
together for 16 years. And about 3 years after divorce, I was dating, and there was this lady that I'd met with in my life, dated her for about 6 months, and then decided that we want to move things forward. I'd like her to move in with me. And everything was great up to that point. The 6 months of seeing her, I actually then spent about 7 or 8 months with my sons introduced to her and spending time going bike riding, going to the forest, just a range of different things, going down to the local little harbor and catching crabs in a bucket. I mean, it was just great fun times together. But then this moment that life started changing dramatically as I started telling my sons she's going to move in with me. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And I don't know if it's the terrible Disney movies and the wicked stepmother and other fears that they might have had, but they just couldn't see me having her within my life. And it just spiraled worse and worse and worse and worse, to the point that the day she moved in was the last day that I saw my sons for 3 years. And it was stubbornness from my side, and I think maybe stubbornness from their side, where I, was thinking, well, they're 10 years old and 13. They can't tell me if they want to see me, my girlfriend, she needs to move out or not be there. And this is a challenge that, as fathers go through divorce, this is quite often something that they experience, in especially when they've got younger kids, to try and understand and accept that partner, especially if it's one of the first partners that have been introduced to the kids. But I didn't understand that, on how to navigate that and the language around that, how to approach it, how to actually understand what my sons were going through. But fast forward, my life just spiraled down. I ended up in hospital turning 40, holding onto an x-ray machine. Not how I expected to be living my life at 40, just out of the pain and suffering of not seeing my sons. Just
Mm.
could never imagine something like this would ever happen. And everything else inside of my life, just nobody around me really understood. And I just isolated myself as well. So it was just the downward spiral that I went, where just the companies I was running, it was 2 companies, started failing. My health failed, just many areas failed. And I got to this point where a year of not seeing my sons, and at least had started turning my life around. And I'll try and shorten this as much as possible, but there's some important points here.
Mm.
7 months into not seeing my sons, I'd met up with my mentor, an older man in his 60s, and said to him, Gwen, I don't understand why my sons don't want to see me. Normally get to see them over this weekend, but they were so angry they don't want to see me. And he said, Gary, what is the gift in this situation. I said, what do you mean? How on earth is this a gift? I don't see my sons. They're angry with me. I don't know how to navigate this. My life is a mess right now. And then I realized, what am I going to do with my life while I don't see my sons? And instead of the spiraling down, I went on an upward spiral. Cleaned up my diet, any alcohol that I might have been having, just removed, sugars removed, started exercising, reading books, got into meditation, so many different tools that I started discovering within my life. And the big pivot that came was when about a year of not seeing my sons, and I'd started doing many more difficult things. That first run that I could barely even do a quarter mile was completely out of breath. Got to a point of being able to run for 40 minutes to an hour without a problem in a very short space of time. And one of the things that I set myself to doing was challenging myself. And one of them was go sleep the night in the forest alone in a waterproof sleeping bag. And I'd never done that before. And just before shutting off my phone, I received an email from my son's school. And I saw in that email that I saw my son had changed his surname. And that made me realize, I mean, that was just like this knife in my stomach. I understand the anger he had. I get it. But it was just something that I, in my mind, thought, this isn't going to be another few weeks or months. This could be a decade or two before life maybe hit my sons and they maybe understood there's other sides to what was actually taking place here. And we're human as well, and mistakes being made. And so I ended up rebooting my life completely. Like, I was at such a bad place within my life. Financially, I was completely broken, and I sold and gave away everything I had down to a backpack with 52 items. And I became a nomad for over 6 years. And this just took me into this incredible journey. But as part of this journey is where I met many other guides, mentors in my life, put myself into very difficult situations, like living with a tribe of hunters-gatherers in the Amazon jungle for a month, and just lessons from that, and being so deprived of food and water and other difficulties like that strengthened my mind, got me to the point where 2.5 years in of not seeing my sons, and a good friend I was traveling with to these different countries, he said, Garry, you talk about your sons all the time. Have you ever thought of just reaching out to their mother and seeing, could you see your sons? And I was like terrified of the thought of that. Time had gone by, and the story.
We'd already been rejected once, right?
Yeah, I just, it was such a painful wound that it kind of scarred over, but hadn't healed. But I realized that's something I had to go and do. And so it felt like going into a gladiator arena, because where she lived and where I lived is, she had 60 family members that were very close in my life, but I hadn't spoken to them. They hadn't heard both sides of what actually unfolded. So it's easy for interpretations to have taken place as if I just abandoned my sons, which wasn't the case at all. It was just these events that took place that just separated us. And so I ended up meeting with her, about a 4-hour coffee that we ended up having multiple coffees, and from her being very angry with me in the beginning, understandably, because she didn't understand exactly what took place, to then eventually showing me photos of my sons. And I said, could I see my sons? And she said, well, let me see if they want to see you. Are you still living in the same place? And I said, no, I'm not. I'm living in South America. And she was shocked. She had no idea that I was there. So she said, let me see if they want to see you. And 2 or 3 days later, I got an email back from her saying, boys are not ready to see you. But 6 months later, I got a message through Instagram from my oldest son. And he had said, hi, Dad. I always wanted to become a professional motocross rider. Is there any way that you'd be able to help me buy a motocross bike? I promise you, I'll pay you back. But I can see you doing it pretty well for yourself. And he said, I don't know why, Dad, but I stay awake till 5 o'clock in the morning crying because I miss you so much. And that was the start of the beautiful Reuniting, and I've been in contact with them ever since. But yeah, this journey has taken me deep into the abyss, the deep uncertainty. But along with this, I've met so many guides and mentors and lessons in life, and it's humbled me by losing absolutely everything that I loved and cared for. And just
Gary,
free forward within life.
it's so interesting because that's an epic story, and there's some things that I'd love to go back to expand on if we can. But I think what really stands out to me is a common thread that I've seen in a lot of men's lives, and it's the choice that we have to make when we face hard things. And we can either crumble to those hard things and give up and quit and surrender to life, which is effectively, in my mind, surrendering to the darkness, to the fear, and we lose ourselves in our despair. And that happens a lot.
Mhm.
I'm sure you have friends in your life that have taken their own lives, taken their lives not yet necessarily, but have given up to the bottle. I've seen that a lot in my life. But hard things make us into something more when we lean into them. And I think men in particular need hard things to engage with, man. We need things to push us beyond our limits and test who we are, to find who we are, because there's something about reaching deep within the abyss, like you're describing, and coming out of that hole and realizing I can do anything. If I put my mind to it and I have a grit and belief in it, I can push through and find the way to find a path forward, and I'll be better for that. And I have things to share with the world around me. And that to me is a sacred role that we play. So I love that you shared that, and I appreciate you sharing that. I am curious. So it sounds like the reason initially that your kids, you lost the ability to see them, was driven by their own disdain for the new person that you were seeing. Were they the push behind it? It wasn't necessarily your wife, or am I wrong there?
There's so many factors that took place. You
Yeah.
imagine on bringing a new woman into a children's life. I feel
How old were
like
they,
I
Gary?
did
Sorry, how old were they at the time?
at the time must have been 9 and 12.
Okay,
9 and
okay.
12.
So I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty pivotal points for young boys. They're kind of, they're becoming their adolescence and all. But okay, but I interrupted you though. So there's many
Yeah,
factors that are.
absolutely. Turbulent time in their life in terms of teenage years and preteen.
Hmm.
Me not knowing how to actually present that in the best way. I'd been the first one to introduce somebody into my son's lives after the 3 years. And so that was quite a harsh reality. And I don't know if in their minds, when I've tried to have conversations with them, they've kind of blanked so much of this out of their minds. They just don't even think about it, as hard as it must have been for them and was for them. They don't really remember. So I don't know if there was just this uncertainty of what this woman would be like in their life. Would she be this wicked stepmother that
Mm,
they've watched in movies? Is it going to mean that they would completely lose me as a father and all the time that we had spent together? Would she replace me, replace them? So many different things, but it's this, I think, this ability for us to cope with difficult situations in life that having we end up having a bit of amnesia on this. So I can't really go back for my sons in terms of what actually took place.
yeah.
I think from my ex's perspective, she was just thinking, well, I imagine that the way I handled it probably wasn't the best way.
Mm,
She was seeing the way the boys were responding and probably the things she was saying to her. So she probably evoked a bit of a mother bear in her to protect the boys. And
yeah.
And I don't know exactly what took place there. I can just assume, but I don't want to assume that. It's
Yeah.
just sometimes when you go through a separation like this and life goes forward, and with the ages and the way things are handled, it just ended up becoming a perfect storm that I could never have imagined would end up going that way. And I dug in my heels, my sons dug in their heels, and none of us moved forward in a healthy way. And as 1 week went by, then it's just, well, maybe they'll come back to me. And then I was thinking I would come back to them. And it's just this ego and this stubbornness that I think were in all of us,
Mm,
not wanting to talk about things and then misinterpretations of things that took place. It just created a greater and greater rift
mm.
between us. And before you know it, just that time went by and I just couldn't believe that that would happen.
Well, it's interesting too, Gary, because I can understand that it's hard to, your kids are young and when it was, and you're obviously not going to speak for your ex-wife. I am curious for you now that you've had time to reflect on this and looking at, and it already sounds like you have some insight in there, but what was it for you in your perspective that contributed to that, that has enabled you now to look back and see some of the mistakes that you made, and now you're able to help other men who you've already described, and we'll get into this too, but has said they've gone through the situations that they're going through, or even like almost kind of make your situation seem very minimal. Like you described it as
Yes.
a scrape on the knee. So what was it that you learned in reflecting on that time?
I realized in looking back compared to the way I live my life now, I hadn't understood life. I hadn't understood the importance of doing hard things. I
Mm,
didn't have this deep foundation to be able to endure the storms of life.
mm,
And with that, this groundedness that we need to be able to address difficult events that do come up, we become emotional because we don't have that deep foundation.
mm,
We haven't been brought through. We've lost so many things that our ancestors used to go through. And that was rites of passages where young boys would become and go through difficulty, hardship, having to survive in a forest for a week or two and do difficult things that gave them the foundation to be able to deal with more difficult things later on in life.
mm,
I didn't have that. My life was, I
hmm,
didn't have extreme adversity within my life. And when it came to this biggest storm that I ever faced in my life, I was just crushed by it.
mm,
And so I didn't have the language, I didn't have the foundation, I didn't have the roots, I didn't have anything to be able to handle this in the best possible way. And it probably, had I had and gone through or had those deeper roots, probably would have resulted in not going through this separation from my sons. But looking back, being the biggest gift because it's brought these incredible teachers in my life. I've learned something about my life. I've learned something about fathers and what it means to be a father deeply, what it
mm,
means to be a man and humble through difficulty. And so when I hear another man's journey and what he's gone through, I have compassion and I can hear him and where he's at, whatever it is. For him, it's the worst thing that's happened to him. There is no, it's like a gas fills all space inside a solid object or inside like a vessel.
mm,
It's the same amount of pain that they go through if it's something they haven't seen their kids for a year or 10 years or whatever it is. It's unbelievable suffering. And so I can understand where a man is at, and I know what it takes to guide him out of that abyss now, because I found my way out of that abyss through the mentors and guides that I discovered along this journey.
mm.
So this is how you actually navigate this. And so it's just turned into such a gift. So I wouldn't change anything. If there was a time machine next to me, I wouldn't change a single thing because I see what young men my sons have become,
Mm.
just beautiful, strong men, and they're the things that they're gravitating towards and their understanding of life has changed, I think, compared to other kids that are at the same age, that were young men that are the same age as them.
It's beautiful, man, and it's so important. I think as a culture, and you bring up a lot of great points because not too far ago, either these things were happening. I mean, even just 100 or so years ago, things were much more difficult with the things that you had to go through, experience the everyday life, the grind of things were just different. There's still hardships that we face today, but not in the same way that our ancestors were, and where you were given were forced to push through these things, whether you wanted to move on or not in life. We have so many comforts now in our world that can lull us to sleep. And I think that's, my wife and I have been watching some of the Harry Potters, Gary, and one of I think it's the third or fourth one. And he talks about Dumbledore. There's a scene, he says, Harry, things are hard. And in life, we often have to make the choice between what is right and what is easy. And it's so common to take the easy path now because the right path is hard usually, but we find ourselves, we find the lessons, the power in those difficult pathways because they're rites of passage, and we don't have those now in our culture. I mean, you mentioned it, you're from South Africa, but so it's still like this is a global component of the lack of rites of passages for young men. And I think it's so important. That's what's wonderful about what you're doing and what you went through is you now can see the distinction between that. And I'm sure you've been able to impart that wisdom on your two young boys, and you're helping other men who have probably, because what ends up happening is we lose ourselves in this weakness, and we're not even who we truly are. And that can be a very heartbreaking thing, and heartbreaking things can happen. So I'm curious, Garry, for you went through your journey, right? You're traveling, you're backpacking. You said you did that for 6 years. And so, but you ended up reconnecting with your kids at some point during that time, right? It wasn't the entire.
No, after 3 years.
Yeah.
3 years, yes.
So
Yeah.
what started to shift for you at that point?
So it's doing hard things. It prepared me for that gladiator arena and to be able to face the most difficult thing there, which was my ex-wife in the story, and having to face whatever anger that my sons might have had. I had the strength because of the hard things that I had put myself through, and I'll share a few of those in a moment. But it's like that saying, still seas don't make a good sailor. And we have become a society that desires more and more comfort. Everything has just been made easier and easier and easier. But we don't realize the consequence of that in terms of that it weakens our foundation to be able to endure those storms that will take place within our lives. There are so many things that can happen within our lives that will bring you to your knees. From break up in a relationship to if you lose a job to start a company and it fails, all of those things, if you don't have that foundation to be able to support you, it can crush and does crush many people. And the other thing that often happens here, because I work with men from 35 all the way up to just short of 70, but many men, as they're getting into their 50s, feel too much time has gone by. I cannot start again. I cannot, my best part of my life is behind me. And so their mind starts defeating them, and they start going down this feeling of where is my life going now? I haven't seen my kids for a year or 2 years or 5 years. And I'm too old now to make about any change. And I'm missing all these wonderful years with my kids. See that as a gift. What are you going to do when you're not with your kids? If you're on your knees and you're broken over this, it takes time to heal, takes time to strengthen your life. Your children don't want to see you when you're at that weakest moment, that broken, drowning man. They want to see you strong. They want to see that you've been able to overcome one of the most difficult things a father would go through, and that's losing contact with his children. They want to see that, and that then is who is going to be able to guide them through other things within their lives as they get into their 20s and 30s. So some of the hard things, it's simple things like doing cold showers. It just builds this resilience. Cold plunges, ice bars, steam rooms, something I do here. I live here in Mexico, and they've got indigenous sweat lodges where you spend 2 hours in complete darkness in ridiculous temperatures. That if you breathe out on the rest of your skin, it burns your skin. It's so hot in there. Those are the things. Running, doing burpees, push-ups. Like right now within my community, we're doing a 24,000 push-up challenge. And I feel like most fathers are going to be easily accomplishing that. It's 100 push-ups 6 times a week. And there's some weeks where you don't need to do 6 times a week. But many fathers are doing 200, 300, 500 push-ups. They're going to blow way past 24,000. Some fathers who could barely do 5 push-ups are doing 100 push-ups now a day. And it's just, we're capable of so much more, but we've got to put ourselves into those high and turbulent seas to understand what we're capable of. So very important. And it's remove things that are not serving you. It's almost like you go for a hike up or trying to start a journey up, hiking up Mount Everest. But most fathers, when they start this journey after losing contact with their kids or this high conflict divorce they go through, it's like starting with a 200-pound backpack. And that backpack is filled with rocks. And those rocks are bad habits and a mindset that doesn't serve you. And they try and do that without a guide trying to navigate up there. So you've got to start by removing those rocks, those bad habits. And it might be from unhealthy food, soft drinks, alcohol, drugs, maybe as a way that fathers are coping with this. Remove all of that. Bring healthy things into your life, like exercising, like getting into nature, journaling, meditation, breath work, all of these beautiful tools. And then a community of other fathers is critical to be able to navigate an extremely difficult like this. And that community is part of your guides, your Sherpas that are going to help you up that mountain. And when you flip down part of that mountain, they're going to be there to help you up and light the way for you. And you can tap into the wisdom that those fathers have gained, because many of them have been up to the top of that mountain. In other words, found their way out of the abyss and have reunited with their kids. But part of this journey is not necessarily having to reunite with your kids. You got to first get yourself to a very healthy place, mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, all of that first before you're going to be in a great place to reunite with your kids. So there's a lot within this journey, as you can feel,
man.
that I've learned from this.
It's amazing, Gary. And I love that because it does start within our lives, no matter where we find ourselves. And especially if we're hard, we're down on our luck, we're feeling sorry for ourselves. It's so easy to get caught in the woe is me, kind of the victim mindset. We all do this. And what I love about what you're sharing and what you shared is these things don't have to be overly complicated either. A lot of the things that you mentioned are extremely practical things to do. I mean, you could start to shift your habits around your food, as you said, or start to kill a habit that's been, maybe you're playing video games too much. Maybe you want to start killing that down and watch playing video games with maybe reading a book. Just start leaning into some of these things that we're uncomfortable with. And I love that too, because there are so many things in our lives that we wish we would have done or we wanted to do more of. Whatever those things are, start to surface them in your life, right? And then start engaging with them. And Gary, what you're describing too is so much about the mindset of this. Like, it starts in your mind. And if you can just simply start, right? And I know I love what you're describing, because if you can simply start in your mind to say, I am capable of more. I can make change. I can become a better version of myself, and I can start today in small ways. And I love the push-up challenge because, dude, unless you're actually injured, there's no excuse about not dropping down and doing some push-ups. And it's hard and you might be out of shape, but finding those healthy discomforts to start building yourself up and start to, because confidence can come from that. And you're starting to cultivate a relationship with yourself. You're starting to lead by example. Because when I hear your story and what you're sharing, Gary, is you became a model for your children. You weren't talking about things. You weren't hypocritically saying, do as I say, not as I do. You were showing them and modeling those actions through your life. And there is nothing greater that a man can do than to live an honorable and noble life with his actions by example. I fully believe that. And so I love the many things that you shared there. Gary, for you, and I'd love to get into how some of this relates to the work that you're doing and where you may find men and how you might start to, because listeners may be out there and they may be in a similar situation, even if they haven't lost their kids necessarily. They're lonely. They don't like their job. They're feeling isolated in a world that continues to get more technologically driven and more divided. And it's a lot of craziness. So Gary, for you, I'm curious, like, when you start to engage with some of the men in your community, like, what do you typically kind of start with? Where do you build from?
Great question there. So the starting point here is like that analogy that I shared with you earlier about hiking up Mount Everest, where you're starting with this big backpack of 200 pounds of rocks. You cannot hike up that mountain with that on your backpack. So you've got to start by removing those. And this is where that mind-body connection starts. So yes, definitely it is the mind, but it's the body as well that is going to hold you back as you start trying to bring about some changes. So remove those unhealthy things. This is where I start with go into your fridge and cupboards. Remove everything that does not serve you and the man and father you're wanting to become. You know, those sodas, those beers, those crisps, all of those things don't actually serve you. So look to remove and get rid of all of those. Then start moving your body. Just go for a walk if you don't do any exercise, a run, get to the gym. Just moving your body starts removing toxins out of your body. So it's this combination of the food or drink that you're having, plus removing those toxins that are inside of your body. Those two start this upward spiral journey. And then you start adding extra things onto that. Journaling, where just through the act of journaling, everything that's going through your mind, because your mind is trying to solve an impossible problem. When do I see my kids again? What's going to happen with this high conflict divorce, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what keeps you awake at night. If you don't sleep properly, you don't remove, your body doesn't heal, you're going to get ill, you don't function properly the next day, you make poor decisions, you're going to react emotionally. When your ex sends you that terrible text message or you get a letter from the lawyer, each of those things are going to just hijack you constantly if you don't have a good foundation to actually be working on here. And so all of these actions, it's looking at the man and father you start becoming. You honoring your children through all of this action. You're not going in this downward spiral and becoming a broken man. You're becoming a stronger man, more resilient man. And it starts building a gravitational force inside of your life because your kids are going to see you. When they do see you, you're going to be very different if a year's gone by or 2 years gone by, definitely after 5, in terms of how you're physically going to be looking, should be looking way healthier and physically better. They're going to see your actions if they spend time with you. Are you just sitting on the couch watching the football and drinking beer and eating Cheetos? Or are you dropping down and doing push-ups? Are you taking your kids for a little hike into the forest? What are you doing and who is around you? This is going to start creating the gravitational force. And this for fathers that even if you haven't lost contact with your kids and you're a father with young kids, they're watching everything that you're doing. For a kid to trust you in what you say, they look at your actions and what you do. And so this is often where as kids get to 9, 10 years old, 11, sometimes younger, they no longer look at you as being the super dad. They see all of your vulnerabilities there, and that's okay, some vulnerabilities, but if they see all your bad habits, they're going to start repeating those bad habits in their life. And as you telling all of these things that tidy up your room and, whatever all the things that you share with them, and they see you living in a mess, then where you coming from? And be healthy and all of these different things. They cannot trust you if you haven't been working on that yourself. So it's an upward spiral journey,
Gary.
And it starts slowly. Start slowly and build up and build up and build up over the weeks and months. This isn't a quick little sprint. This is a marathon. It's a long-term journey. Look at it in that way. If you're 10 pounds, 30 pounds, or 100 pounds overweight, don't look to try and lose that in 2 months. Look to lose that in 2 years. It's then becomes sustainable. And the working out as well, and the health, all of these bad habits, slowly remove them out of your life. It's a process, but get into a community, other brothers that are going to support you in this upward spiral journey.
Gary, and that's great because I talk about that often too, the compounding component of it. And it goes either way. If we compound down with our bad habits, just like you said, you can quickly spiral out where you're gaining weight, you're unhealthy, you're depressed, you're sad. That's the downward spiral. We can compound and spiral up as you're describing, and it's all done through those daily micro actions. And I love that you said it's about what you're doing, because especially with men, people and our kids see through our nonsense. If we say one thing and we do another, are we expecting them to do something that we ourselves will not do? What are we teaching them? That it's okay to be dishonest. It's okay to not follow through with the things we say. It's okay to just impose a will on someone that you have an authority over, but not to lead by example. We're teaching a lot of things that will stick with them for their life. And that resentment, that anger, that pain is what can build up over time. But the beautiful thing is we control all of what you described. And that is the gravitational pull, as you said. As we build ourselves and rebuild ourselves over time, the journey is a critical component too. That's what life is. The more we can get into that mindset and embrace it, the better it will be. But you start to change and shift, and you become like a magnet. And the difference is the next time they see you, and I love this, Gary, like I'm just imagining a father that's been struggling and depressed and sad and lonely, and then they haven't seen their kids in 3 years, and then they come back and the dad's been going to the gym and they're eating right. They're now cooking dinner. And when they come to their dad's for the first time in 3 years, he's got these broad shoulders from all those push-ups he's been doing, and he's hacking up this beautiful ribeye that he's learned to cook in a cast iron skillet. He's gone to butchering classes because he's wanted to learn how to butcher animals and become more sufficient. That is a complete change in what they knew their father to be. And now they're setting an example. They're going to a park, like you said. I think that's brilliant. And we don't give ourselves enough credit for the power and force that we have to change with these actions, do we?
Absolutely. Anna, this is focusing on what you have control over. You don't have control over the family courts and the divorce that's taken place and the lawyers. You don't have control over your ex-wife. You don't have control over your kids. You only have control over yourself. So put all of your energy into that instead of trying to control everything that's outside of your control. And yes, this then creates an incredible gravitational force because they see you. And what happens here is as you start taking this action and you're getting into nature and you start joining some team, a football team or basketball team, or you starting to hike and you're getting involved in different things, you start meeting people along that journey. And maybe you are contributing your time, you're volunteering. And as part of the volunteering, you start realizing, hey, if it wasn't for this fire that ripped through my life, this difficulty that I'd been through, I would not be volunteering right now. I'd be spending this time with my kids. I would not have met this person, wouldn't have had this impact, wouldn't have helped out at the school, this homeless shelter, this refugee camp, whatever it is that is for you as a calling. You then go through this healing and this feeling of gratitude. And then the people that are in your life, your kids are going to see, and they're going to see how other people respond to you. And so instead of this being this angry, broken man, feeling like you've lost this 6 months of not seeing the kids or 6 years, you've filled with gratitude, along with the compounding effect of all of those positive habits. 24,000 push-ups a year times 6 years. You're a very different looking man. You will look younger, probably 5-10 years younger than what they even remember you to be. So this is what the change is. And I've seen that with my sons and how with them coming out here, when times that I spend with my sons, we'd go to the gym and I would kick their butt in the gym, bench press, deadlift, arm wrestles. And then after that, it's become this catalyst to become stronger and bring about changes within their lives. Then my sons listen to podcasts and go to the gym and eat healthily and all of these things as a result of seeing my life and the way I live this journey. That then is part of the role of the father. It's not telling them what to do, but allowing them to see how you actually live your life.
Oh man, it resonates so deeply with what you're saying, Gary, because I've gone through that journey myself, and I've just seen the power and change that can happen when you take that to heart, and action is the greatest way to set change in your life and to show others the way forward. And that's exactly what you're describing, because words are empty. They can mean nothing. I mean, you can say all the things you want, and it doesn't mean anything if you don't do anything about it. And the world that we live in now is so focused on the things we say and how we present ourselves and the image and the projection and all of this stuff, especially with social media. But it's all so fake. None of it's real. It's like, but so this is the counter to that. That's what's amazing too, is we may not realize it, but by changing the course and the way with which we live, changing our lifestyle, we're contributing to the overall growth and betterment of our entire species and society, because we're elevating our own existence. We're teaching our kids how to live a more healthy and loving way by example. They go on and model that. They decide to have families one day, and then they teach their kids the same thing. Your grandfather taught me these things when I was young, and I'm going to show you this. And he told me the importance of learning about hard things and having a strong mind and developing grit and persistence. And that will be lessons that can course correct a lot of these things. Because, one saying that's always stood out to me, Gary, is good times create soft men create hard times create hard men, and then hard men create good times. Like, we're in that cycle now. Like, there's a reason that saying is so powerful, is because no matter how good times may be, we always have to remember that having strength and resilience is paramount and foundational, as men in particular, to a functioning and healthy society.
Absolutely. And as you start going through a journey like this, even if you're a father watching this, even a mother watching this, by the way you live your life, you become such a beautiful roadmap and example for your kids. And this can often break generational cycles that is going to ripple beautifully into the world. So especially a father that does reunite, a mother that does reunite with their kids, and they then see that father and the way he's living his life, and it's a healthy way, it becomes a beautiful roadmap for that child to navigate relationships and know how to handle difficult situations and what to apply within their lives, that they then are going to raise their children in that same way, a healthy way. So there is no magic bullet in this. There's no magic pill. It requires work. It's not easy, but you get to receive the rewards of this in the life you start living and how your kids look at you and the young children that become young men and women based on the guidance that you've provided and the way that you've lived your life. So there is many rewards in this, but it's not easy.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's where the fulfillment comes into play, though. That's where we find fulfillment and meaning, is when we take these things on, we challenge ourselves, we lead by example, we find fulfillment. I would be curious, Garry, for the men that you're helping, when they finally, they start to do this work. What are some things that start to happen with them? Do they start to realize when are some points when you see the light bulb start to go off for some of your men that you work with?
Well, the initial ones where the most common symptom of suffering of what they're going through is sleep. Suddenly they start sleeping through the night. Sleeping aids that they were having, the sleeping tablets, etc., no longer need those. Happily not drinking any alcohol. This desire, this catalyst of doing the push-ups results in them starting to run and sign up to half marathons, going to the gym, volunteering. There is just this life and this energy, and many of them have remarried, and their partners are saying, man, it is incredible. It's like, I feel like you're a different man. And often they are fathers to stepchildren. And so now they're showing up so differently to those kids. And then the fathers and here's the beautiful thing, because I've been doing this enough time to have seen enough fathers reunite with their children. And I'll share one quick example here of a father who was spiraling really badly before joining 100K Fathers. Couldn't get out of bed, just was in a really bad place. And he joined, and I said, you've got to get ready for that moment. If your kids reach out to you, they don't want to see you where you are currently at the moment. You've got to start putting some work in. And he did. He started chopping wood and going on little road trips and bringing about some beautiful changes in his life. And 7 months later, his son reached out to him. Hey, Dad, can we meet up for dinner? And so they did. And the son asked him, Dad, what have you been doing all of this time? Oh, I've been chopping wood and going road trips and camping and doing all these things. What have you been doing all this time? Oh, I've been playing Xbox all this time. Dad, can I come move in with you? And a week or two later, he said, after organizing it, ended up, son moved in with him. But the beautiful changes on that son was incredible, where that son at 14 years old was like 40 or 50 pounds overweight, just playing games all the time, unhealthy diet, ended up losing 40 pounds, started getting into nature, bringing about incredible changes, has got a job, he's got his car license, unbelievable changes that have taken place inside of that child's life, seeing the way his father lives his life. And that is just so beautiful, seeing that full circle taking place.
That's amazing, Garry. I love that. And I think that's often what's so cool about this work, is when we really take care of ourselves, we activate the power and greatness that lives within all of us. We start to inspire others around us. And I mean, I couldn't imagine how wonderful that would be to set an example for your child, because playing video games all the time, these young men, they're getting addicted to porn. They don't even realize the things that that's doing to their minds, their bodies. They're on social media all the time. They're unhappy with relationships. They don't know how to approach women. There's all these things. And like all these obstacles that they're facing now that are these sleeper cells in so many ways that are sabotaging their life in ways that they don't even realize because it's so normal. And what we're doing, that's why I love this, is because you're countering this easy, comfortable, sleepy society that we've all grown up in by going out in nature, by learning to do hard things, by pushing ourselves. We're countering that. We're going back to our roots. We forget, Gary, that we are a part of nature and we always will be, no matter how evolved we become and how technologically advanced we become. We are always a part of nature. We are always a part of life. And those are our roots. And when we get away from those roots, we lose ourselves. And I love that you're sharing these examples because it's prime focus on how to get back to living just simple. And it seems so basic, but it's so powerful.
It's not complicated, but you got to start, and you've got
Exactly.
to, try and find this community guides that have walked this journey and the brotherhood to be able to support you through this. That is critical because many fathers that go through this, they start isolating themselves. So important, but it is, you'll look back, and I'm speaking to that father right now watching this. It feels like his life has spiraled down so deep into that abyss that he cannot find a way out. Just take these steps slowly, step by step by step by step. And before you know it, with these positive habits and removing the unhealthy ones, you'll be in a different place. You'll start feeling different. And then with that, other positive habits will come in. And it will build this momentum within your life. And this feeling that you're feeling right now will dissipate. That first year is the most brutal. No, it gets better after that.
And then it's a great reminder too, because the journey component is super important, but man, when you're starting this, it can be really brutal. So I'm glad you brought that up. I am curious, Gary. I'd love for you to share a little bit about your 100K fathers. Kind of clarify, if you can, what the mission, because it's a very inspiring vision that you have, man.
Yeah. So the mission is to help prepare 100,000 fathers to reunite with their children. And the very key word there is prepare to reunite. It's not forcing those kids into the child's life through family court or reunification therapy, anything like that. It's preparing that man for that. And so it's working with men, mostly in the United States and Canada, but we do have some fathers in other countries in the world. And it's this beautiful community. We've got programs to support fathers, depending on where the father is at. And I run 100K fathers like Robin Hood, fathers that do have funds and resources, pays for the community and the programs, and fathers that don't. I've got beautiful scholarship programs, part and full scholarship programs, so that any father that is looking for this help, there is some form of support that is available to them. So don't go at this alone. There is many fathers that walk this journey. Even connecting with another father that is further along in this journey can make a world of difference to a father that is going through something like this. So it's the upward spiral journey here, and there is incredible to see the changes in fathers' lives and the stories, and from being deep in the abyss to where they're at right now. And then the stories of fathers that are reuniting with their kids. It's a very humbling and beautiful journey, this.
Oh man, it's so cool, Gary. Well, I'm very thankful that we met and we've connected, and you're going to get you've gotten a chance to share some of your story on here and how you're helping men. This is such a noble mission that you're on, and it's so important too in the world that we're living in. And so I really appreciate you coming on and sharing and being so open and vulnerable, and also just sharing the power of leaning into tough, difficult things, man, because we are capable of incredible, incredible things. And it's all inside of us ready to be activated, but we've got to activate it. And as you've said many times in this discussion, it's all through these actions that we take. It doesn't have to be complicated, but you got to start doing something. And I think there's a lot of practical things that you shared in this conversation. And Gary, so I appreciate it, man. But two things, I always do this with all my guests that they come on. I've been so privileged to have such wonderful conversations with men and women like yourself. What would be a parting message that you'd like to share with our audience here as we wrap up our conversation together? And then the last thing would be, how can they get in touch with you if they're interested in learning about the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. And I would like to reinforce, when you go through something like this, It's going to feel like an abyss where you're so alone and lost and it feels hopeless. There is a way out, and it's just a slow step by step by step. You're going to find yourself in a very different place in 1 year's time, 2 years' time, 5 years' time. And hold in your mind that you're doing this to honor your children, that they're going to want to see a healthy version of you as a man and a father. Hold that deep. That's going to become your why when you feel like giving up on the push-up challenge, or feel like not working out that day, or going for a run, or you're tempted to have some alcohol because you're feeling like suffering instead. You're going to rather go for a little walk into nature or just round the block. We'll start shifting this. So know things do get better through these positive actions that are inside of your control, and keep focusing on those things that are within your control. And then the best way to reach out to me is just doing a Google search, 100K Fathers. That's 100K-fathers.com. But just even Googling that, you're going to come across a couple of YouTube videos, the website, and from that would be ways to be able to reach out to me.
Oh man, that's excellent, Garry. I really appreciate you sharing. I think there's a lot of wisdom and simplicity in what you're sharing. It's very clear to me that you learned a lot in these 6 years, and you continue to learn on this journey, man, because there's only one way to find and discover these insights, and that's through the trial and fire of existence, and leaning into those difficulties. And we need that more now, because I don't think things are going to get any easier with the way the world's going right now. And so the more prepared we can be, which I love the way you framed that too earlier, by the way, the prepared to reunite with your kids, you're not forcing anything, but you're preparing men to reunite with them. I think that's a wonderful mission. Well, it's an honor and a privilege for me to help you share that story, that mission, that vision that you have. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing, man.
Brandon, it's an absolute honor. Thank you for hosting me and sharing this space with me today, and allowing some of this to be shared with your audience.
Yeah, man, it's a pleasure. I'm excited to watch your journey, and I get a feeling that there's going to be some growth. I can't wait to watch. That's the cool thing about this is, you get to see where you start these journeys and where you end up over the years together. So I'm very excited about that, Garry. So I definitely appreciate it. For the audience out there, I appreciate your eyes and your attention, your ears. There's all the things that are vying for your attention in this world. There's nothing more valuable that you can offer than your attention and sitting here with us as we're sharing these conversations and insights. So I hope you're finding value and power in them, to find ways to apply them in your life, because ultimately that's what it's about. And we all have this great potential within us that's waiting to be activated. We just got to call it forward. So I think Garry spoke to a lot of that. So with that being said, until next time, y'all. Thank you for listening to Order Within. If you found the episode helpful, please consider sharing, rating, and subscribing. New episodes will be released every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until next time, y'all.